I lived in Philadelphia, Frankfurt, part of Frankfurt called Northwoods. It was a nice residential area. It was about 4 blocks from Frankfurt Avenue, where the elevated ran, and it was a block from Frankfurt High School. Really, really a very, very nice area. I was I was 21. The way that whole thing happened was that in 1940, Roosevelt anticipated this war, and so he had a draft that started. Anyone who's 21 in 1940 got called up for the draft. Well, I was 21 in 1941, and so I was to be called up for the draft. And I was in college, and I expected to get a deferment, but I got turned down by the draft board. So, in fact, the president of the draft board practically jumped in glee because you're just the kind of person we want. This is what the Army wants of you. Well, I'd had ROTC at Penn State, and they sent me out in January doing mapping where you couldn't even wear gloves or anything. I froze to death. I said, no way do I want to be in the Army. So I joined the Navy before I got drafted, September 22nd, 1941. So I was, 21 years and 4 months old at the time. My family life, I can't tell you how wonderful our family was. It was just a great family. We had a tragedy. My mother died when I was 14, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, and my dad and the rest of it just all pulled together. So we just had a great family life. We had Sunday dinner together every Sunday, and my older brother Bob was 7 years older than I was. He kind of looked after me, and I looked after my younger brother, and so it was just great. I mean, to just give you an idea, I was 16, and I was between jobs. I had a job at a grocery store, but I was on vacation at the seashore, and my brother Bob came down to spend a few days with me, and he said, we're going for a ride. So we hopped in his car and went for a ride and went down to the gardens in Ocean City, and he says, okay, now go out and get out in the driver's seat. I said, Bob, I don't have a driver's license or anything. He says, just do it. So he taught me how to drive when I was 16, and that was so much fun because there's a lot of sand down there, and you had to clutch out too fast. The wheels would spin, the sand goes screwed up. But he was he was my role model. I didn't realize it at the time, didn't realize it until I was in my 30s or 40s, but what a great big brother I had. And my younger brother, whose birthday is at the end of this week, was and is my best friend our whole lives. We've just been great brothers. And I had a wonderful sister who was very caring, and she kind of mothered my younger brother after my mother died. But we were all just very close. There was never a battle, a feud or argument or anything. Little bitty things, I hated washing dishes, and that was my job. And I'd get a little uppity about it once in a while. My brother Bob would stamp on me. Actually, I didn't have to go to boot camp at that time, and it wasn't until December 7th that all of us reserves, I was in the reserves, got called up, and I reported for active duty on the 12th of December, 1941, 5 days after and so they just had your phone number, just called you up. So I reported for active duty on the 12th of December, and I went to the Navy Yard, Philadelphia, and for some reason or other, they forgot me down there for 5 months. And so I learned the ways of the Navy while I was there. It was really neat. I had a great mentor by the name of Bill Wenzel, and he told me the odds and ends of how to be a sailor, and I worked for him distributing clothing in small stores. He was my CPAPI. And then the 15th of May of 42, they caught up with me and sent me to boot camp, and sent me down to Cape May to boot camp. And I was only in boot camp for a couple of weeks, and then I went to the Canary. Didn't really do the whole boot camp thing. They needed somebody in the Canary, and so I went. So that's where I learned to be a sailor. Anything and everything, from raising and lowering the anchor, to raising and lowering the ship's boat, to steering the ship, to washing dishes, to scrubbing the decks. Had a broomstick. We had a piece of material like a brick. It was about just the size of a brick, and I had a little hole in the top, a little dent in the top. And you put this broomstick in it, and you went like this, and you scrubbed the deck. They're wooden decks. We had wooden decks. And did that, and scraped paint, stood watches, midnight to 4, 8 till midnight, you know, that kind of thing. Oh. Of course, and it was on a minesweeper, so you streamed gear and you recovered gear. Recovering gear was a mess because we had a vertical shaft that the gear was a big wire, and you went around the staff. These fleet minesweepers had a horizontal shaft, so they could just come up and they float. But we had to pack ours. We had to stack it up, and you got soaking wet doing that because it was covered with canvas.
Yeah.
So.
And
Tiny. Once you got up in the morning, there was no place to sit down until you went to bed at night. We had a dining room table down in the crew's quarters. It was down for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And we ate off trays at lunchtime. Very, very crowded.
did you have?
But there were only 13 of us. Oh yeah, I had friends. Actually, the skipper, William E. Shepard, was the skipper, and he became my friend on ship, and he looked after me and included me in when I needed to apply for promotion and that kind of thing. And then there was a little guy from Atlantic City, another seaman. I was at the bottom of the pile making $30 a month, and little guy, this guy named Levitt from Atlantic City, and he was my buddy. Then there was another fellow, John B. Renner, and he was a chief electrician, and he kind of acted like he was the dad of all of us on the ship. So we were so close together that there was no way that you wouldn't be friends. The only person I wasn't friends with was the officer's cook. That's all he did. He took care of just the officers. There were only 3 officers. He cooked for them. That's all he did. And he was nasty to the rest of us. It was like it was 2 different countries.
Yeah.
He didn't do any of the other stuff that we did. I don't think he even helped to recover gear. Yes, I did. I was on the minesweeper for 6 months, and because I wanted to be a carpenter's mate, I got transferred back to the base, and I spent over a year on land, worked in the carpenter shop, both at Cape May, and then I went to Naval Air Station Atlantic City. When I got to Naval Air Station Atlantic City, I went and reported to the man who was in charge of the barracks, called the Chief Master at Arms. And I said, I'm your carpenter's mate. I was 3rd class carpenter's mate by then. That's 4 steps up. And I was making $60 a month. I went to him and I said, I'm your carpenter's mate. Do we have a carpenter shop somewhere? And he looked at me and he said, I don't need you. I said, why not? He said, I've got a carpenter's mate. I said, well, is he rated? He said, no, he's not. I mean, was he a petty officer? No, he's not, but he will be. So I said, what should I do? He says, take a walk. So I did. So I walked all around the airport, and I heard a machine running, and I followed my ears to this machine and opened it up, and it was a big, wonderful shop. So to make the long story short, I went in and talked to the fellows in there, and I asked if they could use a sailor, and they said, yes, we can. And I went and talked to my personnel officer, and they let me work in there. So I was working with older men who were civilians, who were all craftsmen carpenters. So I just had 6 months in there with them. And then I got transferred to a hotel, and I was in charge of maintenance of the hotel. By this time, I was second class, and making $72 a month.
I can see how we're progressing up.
Yeah, up.
Slowly.
And I was there for 6 months, and that's when I got transferred to the Cyberlink. That's when my luck ran out. No, we were in the South Pacific. We were afraid. The Japanese were a formidable enemy. They were out to sink us, and in any way they possibly could. And it wasn't just an 8-hour-a-day war. It was 24 hours a day. You never knew when the kamikazes, which were the suicide planes, were going to try and strike us. So the first week that we were all panicked. But it's amazing how the human body adjusts. So after the first week, why we were less and less afraid, and then it just became routine. We just did our jobs like we were, working at home, doing whatever. And then the last time that we were really afraid was in a typhoon in the South China Sea. And we had reason to be afraid because we had 3 ships capsize. And out of 800 men, they only saved 80. 800, so that 720 men died. And the ship turns upside down, there's no way to get out of it. If you're on deck, you can get out. But if you're in the engine room or in any of the compartments, there's no way to get out.
I could see that being very scary. Yeah.
It's called Halsey's Typhoon, and that's a library book. And if you ever get a chance to look it up, they have it here at the Doylestown Library, and it'll give you the whole story of how we got into the typhoon and why we got into it, and what we did while we were there, and what ships survived and the damage of ships, and how the 80 men got rescued. The 80 men got rescued because the skipper of a ship disobeyed orders. After the typhoon subsided, we were ordered back to the fleet. The fleet was, 300 or 400 ships altogether. And the skipper on the ship was heading back to the fleet, and he spotted a raft in the water. And he called ahead and said, I'd like to investigate to see if there's anything else in the water here. And he was told, no, you return to the fleet. So he disobeyed orders, and then that's when he found the other men. We had 4 major battles. We had the first major battle was at Lingayen Gulf in the Philippine Islands. That was when we were invading the island of Luzon. That was the second major battle in the Philippines. The first one was Leyte Gulf. And so we spent 2 weeks taking aircraft carriers in and unloading soldiers to invade. So that was a battle there, and we were battling both kamikazes and submarines there. Then we went to Iwo Jima, and we did the same thing there, and we were battling. We weren't have so much worry with submarines as we were with kamikazes. And we were there for 2 weeks. And then we went to Okinawa, and we were there for 8 weeks. We arrived on Palm Sunday, which was April the 1st, and April the 8th was Easter. We invaded Okinawa on April the 8th, and we patrolled all around the island day and night to shoot down kamikazes and protect our ships, our troop ships, from submarines. So, yes. Well, sailors are full of pranks, and we played all kinds of jokes on everybody. You know, it was one of the jokes is that you get the newest recruit on board and you assign him to a chief petty officer, and the chief petty officer will say, "Well, I need somebody to help you out on this job, so I want you to go find Charlie Noble." So he goes from person to person, asks who Charlie Noble is. Well, Charlie Noble is the cook stove's chimney. So things like that.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we had a brand new officer came on board, an ensign, and we're out in the middle of the Pacific, and they start the rumor as to we're going to be approaching the mail buoy. So he's all excited so he can get the mail buoy, and so we've got him up in the boat, up on the bow of the boat with a boat hook, waiting to approach the mail buoy. We're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's no mail buoy anywhere near within 1,000 miles. Those kind of things. Oh yes, all the time. I had a lot of free time. We were on 4 off. We were on duty for 4 hours and 8 hours off. So part of my 8 hours was sleeping, and then part of my 4 hours sleeping, and then I did a lot of reading, and I did rope yarn seamanship. That's people call it macrame now. I made a belt and other things, you know, and did a lot of that. The other thing that I did in my free time was I never missed a sunset. The sunsets in the Pacific are just unbelievably fabulous. The Pacific Ocean is covered with all kinds of clouds. Big clouds, little clouds, black clouds, white clouds, gray clouds, finger-type clouds. Oh, and sunsets in those things, it was indescribable. And I never missed a sunset the whole time I was on board ship. Always, even if I had the duty, I managed at least to get up on deck long enough to see the sunset. That's a good question. Well, all of 1942 is what we'd lost the war. All of 1942, when I was on the minesweeper, we felt so helpless because we had not prepared for war. The Germans owned the East Coast. I had to rephrase that. The Germans owned the East Coast. They might as well have their port in New York or Philadelphia or Baltimore. They had the whole East Coast patrolled by submarines. And so it was very futile. We lost ships after ships after ships that came out of New York or came out of Philadelphia or came out of Baltimore to German submarines. And then the first bright spot that we had was when Jimmy Doolittle did the raid on Tokyo in 1943. And before that, we had two major battles at Guadalcanal, and we lost like 6 ships. We lost 2 aircraft carriers. We were down to 2 aircraft carriers. You know, we only had 4 to start with, and lost 2 of them. So that was in 1943. Well, by 1944, things were starting to turn around, and we were getting stories of victory in Europe, and listening to that all the time. And we realized that we were being able to move from Guadalcanal up through New Guinea, up through Manus Island, up to Palau, up to the Western Carolina Islands, a little at a time, the Island March, which was controlled by Douglas MacArthur. And so by end of 1944, we realized that it was only going to be maybe another year or two. Still now, we ended in 45. Figured, well, in a year or two, we'll win. So the last thing that really, when Germany surrendered, that was a wonderful sign. That was in May of 1945. And then in, was that 44 or 45? I'll have to check on that.
I believe it was 45.
45. And then we knew we were going to have a terrible battle with the Japanese. They are fierce fighters, and they were indoctrinated to serve the emperor. And I got sent back, after Okinawa, I got sent back to the United States to get a new ship because I was overrated. By that time, I was first class petty officer, making $81 a month.
Yes.
And to get a new ship to invade Japan. And if it hadn't been for the atomic bomb way, you probably wouldn't see me talking to me today. Because the Japanese coastline is so variegated, there would be no way that we could find a spot like we did in France to land troops. We'd have to land in these little spots, and it would have been pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to do very much because I was at sea when Germany surrendered, but I was home in August of 1945 when the Japanese surrendered. In fact, I was mowing the grass. I was stationed at Navy Yard, Philadelphia, waiting for my new ship, and it was just a tremendous excitement, relief. Almost so wonderful you could hardly believe it. I mean, after all 4 years, is it finally over? You know, it took weeks to really realize that the war was over. Tremendous gratitude. I was on a mission trip with Georgetown Church down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, 2 years ago. And we were visiting a wonderful Indian school down there. Had a really nice little library, little round library, and they had all the little Indian children were all around, and they had a counter with a whole bunch of books on it. A lot of them having to do with World War II. And of course, doing with the code, the code workers too. The Indians, you know, because of their native language, went to the South Pacific, and they could communicate between each other, and the Japanese couldn't break the code. So I was looking at these books and these code talkers, and one of the women, who was not a member of our church but was on that mission trip, came over and she sidled up beside me over on the side here. She looked at me and she said, "Do you really think it was necessary for us to drop the atomic bomb?" I lost it. I just broke down and I cried my eyes out. I couldn't answer her. I walked across the room and I put down my head down the table. I just bawled like a kid, like I'd been hit in the head. And I got myself together. And I went back to her and I said, "Ma'am, it was a terrible thing that we did. But," I said, "you wouldn't be talking to me today if it hadn't happened." That's the best I can give. It's the best I can give you. But
If we
on the other hand, it saved a lot of Japanese lives, and it saved thousands of American lives and English lives and Australian lives and Scottish lives, because we all would have been together in the invasion of Japan.
yes, in the evasion, many people would have.
And it would have taken months, because they were so well defended, and the access to the islands was just so bad. we got out on a thing called points, and I was stationed still at the Navy Yard, and I knew that my points, I'd have enough points. You got 1 point for each day that you were in the service, 1 point you got for each day that you were at sea or in active duty or in action, and they added it all up, and that's how they just discharged everybody. They just couldn't say, okay, guys, go home. They had to process all this. So the fellows who had been in first, the fellows who went in 1940, of course they had the most points, they got out the soonest. So I knew that I would have enough points, and you could add these up, all you had to do is count the days, and I knew I'd have enough points sometime in the middle of November of 1945. And I had already enrolled back at Penn State. 1st of October came along, 10th of October came along, and I thought, boy, it sure would be neat if I could get out before November. And I used to check with the discharge people every day, what number you got, what number are you to now? Are you 4,036, are you 4,055, that way. So on the 24th of October, I got called down. They said, you're going to be discharged tomorrow. So on the 25th of October, 1945, I was discharged at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Picked up my last paycheck. My last paycheck was a dime, because I had a 75 bond out of every month, so that left me 10 cents, which I still say I saved a dime. And that was a Friday afternoon. Sunday afternoon, I was on the bus to Penn State, 27th of October. Classes started on the 29th.
That's great.
I would have missed a whole semester. If I had to wait another week.
Timing was just impeccable.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That was very, very, very exciting. And I remember putting away my uniform, which only had 2 little pockets in the front and a pocket at the top. That's all it had. You had 3 pockets. You carry your comb in the laces on the back of your trousers. Your trousers laced up in the back. You had the 13 buttons, and that's where you carried your comb. So you carried your wallet, usually like over your pants like that, because it wouldn't fit the pocket. The pockets were little. So on the way to Penn State, I got lost with all these pockets. I had 2 pockets in the back and 2 pockets in the front, pocket in my jacket. Took a while to get used to that luxury again.
Were there any
Well,
changes?
the family was over. We had all served, Bob, Fred, and I had all served active duty. My sister had married an Air Force guy, and they got married during the war, and they settled in Swarthmore. My older brother got married in 1943, so he was gone. Then when Fred and I got back out of the service, we were at Penn State then for 2 years after that. And we came back and lived at home with my dad. Then my brother got married in 1949, that left me. So that actually family life was over. However, we did come for holidays, we all got together. I have pictures of, all 15 of us all lined up. I graduated from Penn State in 1947 and started teaching Bristol Township, and I taught there for 2 years, and then I got recruited to go to Abington, and I went to Abington and I was there for 33 years. So they're the only 2 jobs that I had at that time.
Well, thank you so much, Bill.
We got it finished? Got it all?
We got it all.
Yeah. And I had a 37-year honeymoon teaching school. I loved it, and that's why I still teach school, and that's why I still work with the 4th, 5th, and 6ers and with Element, because I really enjoy being around young people.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Okay, you're welcome.